Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Exceed Designs TiRant Razer V3, which is a titanium frame lock, but instead of what we expect with the blade, we have replaceable razor blades. We have housing and a replaceable razor blade, which is pretty cool. Now, the first thing that a bunch of people are going to say is, why wouldn't you just, if you're going to do that, why wouldn't you just buy, a $5 utility knife? You know the answer to that. You know the answer. But if you don't know the answer, you're going to pretend like you don't. I'll tell you, it's because these are boring. You made it here because you also think they're boring, right? This stuff is just cooler. It just is. Sometimes that's the way that it works, and we don't really need to explain it further. I don't mind admitting that. I think some people have a hard time admitting that they pay more money for things just because they're a little bit more interesting. Don't worry, I'll do it for you. This costs more than this, but this is made differently and is vastly more interesting. Actually, I really like this thing. This is fun, and it allows you, obviously, the utility and convenience of replaceable razor blades, but the cool factor of a titanium frame lock flipper, or the fidget factor, right? You'll have to excuse my hands. I got some black stuff on there. I think it was from my son's bike. I have no idea how to get it off. It won't leave. Anyways, thanks so much to Exceed Designs for sending this in for me to take a look at. These are available right now. When I checked, they take a little bit to ship. They're actually, I initially thought that these were entirely made in China. It turns out some of the parts come from China, but they also do a lot of the CNC milling in the United States, which absolutely is going to go into the cost of it. And it also slows down their output capacity, right? Because they are, definitely a small company. So it's taking them a little bit to ship. I think they listed 4 to 5 weeks or something like that, but they absolutely will get it to you. And it's nice to know that some of the work here is being done in Washington in the United States. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. As far as which razor blades will fit in here, I mean, it's meant to be accommodating for a very large percentage of these hexagon style razor blades. I think on their website, which I'll try to also link down below, it shows a wide variety of different styles of blades that will actually work in this thing. But if you're wanting all encompassing, I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this thing overall. So the overall length of the Tyrant Razer V3 is coming in at, I mean, if you want to go to the back of the handle scales, it's about 5.75 inches. If you want to go to the back of the backspacer, it's 6 inches. The blade length, well, I mean, I don't know how they'd actually measure this, right? I mean, we're coming in at like 2.5 inches, but where the cutting edge is, I mean, this is going to be the same as a utility razor. It's just shy of 1.5 inches, right? It's like 1.85 inches. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. So this is going to be a nice, small, compact knife. Definitely not something that's going to be super cumbersome. How about up against the Demco 8020.5? How about up against the Benchmade Bug Out? And last but not least, let's put it up against the Spyderco Para 3. I don't think we really need to do a whole lot more than that. How's the action on this guy? The action is actually really good. The detent is tuned nicely, and the lock bar relief, there's plenty of access. I mean, it's a big rectangle, right? But all the edges are knocked down. There's no lock stick or anything like that. The detent feels really good, and it is really smooth. Anybody who is familiar with, modern titanium frame lock flippers that run on bearings, this is going to feel strangely organic, right? And you look at it and you're like, it's a utility razor, and then you go to pick it up, and immediately your brain goes back to, sort of enthusiast knife world mode, which is really nice. It's very accommodating in that way, and it's really surprising in that way, honestly. It's fun. The action's really good for what it is. I really have no complaints, especially considering the price on this thing, which I think is also pretty darn good. We'll talk about that more here in a little bit. Carry profile, thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's actually very much not a thick object. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. This is the PM2. The other one's the Para 3. I just did them out of order. You can see here it's really not going to take up all that much room in the pocket, even including the flipper tab. It's nowhere near as high as the peak on the hump of the Para 3. Let's go ahead and, measuring blade stock thickness is not going to do us any good because this is not actually the blade stock. It's going to be the Razer blade, and as you can see, it's very thin, right? Razer blades are thin. I don't know that we need to do that. But let's go ahead and talk about the materials and the weight here. So this particular version, by the way, it is milled out for weight reduction. This is in titanium. They do have, I think it's DLC coated titanium or PVD coated titanium. They also have, if you want, different carbon fiber scales, including like a textured one, this is actually really nice. So these are actually milled, as far as the website says, in the USA, in Washington, which is cool. I am guessing that's also where they're milling the titanium. As far as which parts are coming from China and which parts are actually being machined here in the United States, I don't know. I checked on their Amazon listing. I checked, which is going to be down in the description. I checked on their website and went through their question and answer zone, and it just says some of the parts are made here, and some of them are, outsourced to China. So I don't know. I'm just telling you guys what I saw. Yeah, I would guess that they're machining or milling these titanium scales in Washington, which would explain why, if they're, a smaller company, it would explain why, if the demand is really high, they're being slowed down in terms of getting things out to people. But anyways, let's go ahead and weigh it. The weight on this knife is coming in at 2.4 ounces, which, a lot of people say, oh, weight to blade ratio or whatever, it's pretty on point. I mean, kind of, but again, this doesn't really count as the blade. But 2.4 ounces, I'll say this, that's a pretty low amount of weight for a, knife that's full titanium. Balance is a little bit back. I think it was obvious this thing was going to be slightly butt heavy, but I don't, it's a 2.4 ounce rectangle. I can't sit here and pretend like this is in any way cumbersome. Really, as soon as you put it in your pocket, it's going to disappear, as it did with me. It just completely disappears. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I believe the pivot is a T8. There we go. And then we have T6 for the lock bar insert screws. Yes, it has a lock bar insert. And then T6 for the body screws. It's also going to be T6 for these screws right here, which you would think you needed to take off in order to access where you change the blade out. But you actually don't. I'm going to demonstrate this real quick without cutting myself. You can actually just push back here, and it took me a couple of tries to get this right. You can push back here, and what it'll do is allow the blade to come out. And that's all you have to do to switch the blade, if you want to change the blade out, which I think is really cool. I mean, that's a lot of people always talk about, and it's, by the way, it's backed in, or it's right back into place right there. A lot of people always talk about these things. They're like, oh, yeah, well, okay, it's cool, but, can you, switch the blade out super fast? Like, when I'm on the job, I gotta switch the blade out fast. I don't have time to stop and take it apart and put the blade in because I gotta switch it out fast. Yeah, you can. There you go. So you gotta go back to complaining about the price, right? Which, again, is silly because you made it here. You clicked on this video and you watched all the way to this point, right? You're here trying to convince yourself because you're bored with this, right? I literally keep this around to remind myself of my extreme just disgust at the hypothetical idea of limiting myself only to things like this. Oh, no thank you. My tastes have certainly evolved past the desire to wield such primitive. All right, enough with that. But yeah, you can switch the blade out super quick, which is really, really cool. I think that's neat. Okay, what else do we need to do here? I don't think anything. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes. Ergonomically, it's like holding onto a smooth rectangle, right? I don't feel like I'm locked in the same way that I would be with like the Spyderco Shaman, obviously, but you can hold on to it, right? It is not the most uncomfortable rectangle I have ever gripped, but it is nowhere near the most ergonomic thing I have ever experienced. I mean, I think it's doing what it was designed to do, which is just be a compact and convenient sort of fidgety but also utilitarian object, right? Wow, that was a lot of syllables to say it's a rectangle that can cut things. Yeah, you know, your ergonomic experience is gonna be just kind of blah. I mean, you can hang on to it, you can use it to cut. It's doing what it was designed to do. It's not gonna blow your socks off ergonomically. The flipper tab, fortunately, is really knocked down, nice and smooth, right? You can light switch it or you can push button it. Either way, you're good. The lock bar is very thin, which I think is just fine because it allows you to place your fingers almost anywhere, like naturally on the other side of the frame. I mean, if you down here, you're really going to end up landing on the pocket clip. So not often do I feel, even though the whole thing is fairly narrow, I don't really feel like I'm going to accidentally land on the lock bar and put pressure on it while I'm flipping it. It really just kind of does what you'd expect it to do. You know, obviously the downside to using something like this, yes, there is a downside, is that you have a very limited amount of cutting edge. And while this amount of cutting edge will get 99% of people through 99.9% of all tasks that would require a sharp object or blade, there are some situations where you need a longer blade, right? It's not actually that narrow. I mean, every now and then you're just going to need more cutting edge. So if this is your dedicated day-to-day cutting apparatus, if you come across a task that requires a longer blade, this guy's not going to be able to do it because it is limited to, you know, 1.5 inches. I think that's what I said. It's 1.5 inches of cutting edge. That's just going to be the case. But, you know, it's not possible to have every single tool on you that will prepare you for every single situation. That's why I carry a Leatherman. Yeah, even a Leatherman, right? There's going to be situations where you're just not carrying the right tool. If you want to carry a Leatherman, right, then you carry that Leatherman if that makes you feel more prepared. I don't know what you're doing here. Obviously, a Leatherman's going to be more, you know, universally more capable than something like this, right? But that's fine. If it's working for you, then you just keep on carrying that. Yeah, this will get you through. Like, let's apply it to me. My day-to-day. This absolutely is probably still more than I would need. I could easily get through my day with just this much knife. Generally, I carry a knife that has more blade, really just for me, right? I don't necessarily need 3.5 inches or 4 inches of blade, but I often carry knives that are that big because I like it, because I think it's neato and super cool, and I don't really feel like I need to explain it beyond that. But yeah, me day to day, this would be just fine. In fact, this would be just fine. But I don't carry this because this is boring. But this'll do it for sure. The other nice thing about you know, having a knife like this is obviously you can just replace the blade when it goes dull. You don't have to sharpen it, right? Some of us really, really enjoy sharpening. I'll admit I don't really like sharpening. So there's an appeal to this. Once this blade gets dull, you just pop it out and put another one in. They were kind enough to include a whole bunch of additional blades. I don't know that these are anything super duper crazy ultra premium, right? But if you want to, you can buy the super nice ones or you can buy the ceramic ones. Those aren't, people always say, you know, buy the ceramic. Those aren't very tough, right? None of them are because they're super duper thin, right? But you know, just like with any blade material, you have to, you know, consider the four cornerstones, right? But yeah, the nice thing is once the blade goes dull, you just pop it out and you put another one in, right? Over time, the amount of money that you'll spend on replaceable razor blades might equate to the cost of a super duper premium knife, right? But if you put that money into a super duper premium knife, and you use it the way that you would something like this, then you'll be spending an enormous amount of time sharpening and reprofiling. And eventually, over maybe multiple decades, that blade will eventually, be nothing. So either way, no matter what, right? If you use your stuff, time and use will consume the object, right? We live in a finite universe. Also, spending an enormous amount of time trying to figure out the exact point of, the perfect economic sort of cycle, right? That also just seems like a ridiculous waste of time. I would say skip all that and just go for things that you enjoy, right? As somebody who owns like 150 pocket knives, I obviously have gone far past the whole, trying to figure out, exactly how little I can spend and exactly how long I can extend the life of the tool. Nope, I just buy what I like, and it brings me happiness, which I think, is something that you can't necessarily put a price tag on. But anyways, what the heck is he talking about? Which is, whenever you talk about these utility razors, you got these min-max folks who are just like, well, I spent $1.75, and it's like, how do I avoid it? How do I mitigate it without cracking jokes, which is one of my favorite things to do, is crack jokes. Yeah. So that's nice that you have that, you can pop the blade out, right? It's really cool. I love that it's got the little release there. I think that's really great. The knife comes with a bunch of stuff. They put this in there, which is kind of a little flathead screwdriver, pry bar scraper kind of deal to replace the backspacer. And that's neat, but I think you actually have to pay a little bit more money for this on their website. I don't think it's very much. I think it's like $10 or something like that. It does come with an extra pivot, which, by the way, is captive. You can see there. That score rests below the surface of the titanium. That's nice. It comes with an extra steel lock bar insert. Comes with a tool for disassembly, which is really nice. Comes with extra screws. An extra, I believe, what is this? I'll have to dig that out of there to actually figure it out. And we're just going to use the good old... I suppose I could have actually used the razor itself, right? This must be... Yeah, one of the barrels. It's the Chicago end for one of the screws, probably back here or something like that. But it comes with an extra one of those, which, okay. And the razor blades, which is neat. You can buy separately the scales. You can get smooth carbon fiber, or my suggestion would be to go with this texture stuff, because this is really, really cool. And it'll also reduce the weight of your knife. I think those are about $17, which isn't bad. There is a lanyard hole. Hallelujah. You can attach a lanyard to this if you want to, for some reason. I don't know why they didn't... I don't know why they don't have a spot for left-handed carry on this thing. I think that would be a good idea. Lefties could easily, I'm right-handed here, and you can see that this is very easy for me to manipulate, right? You'd have to put it upside down. A lot of people say you can just put it in your pocket like that. You have to put it upside down, and the problem with that is if it does deploy, which it's pressed up against the, back seam of your pocket if you're carrying it correctly, right? You put it up against the front seam, and then that's just not a good idea for obvious reasons, right? You put it up against the back seam, and then it deploys in your pocket. Then you got the blade pointed up, which is not a good idea. That's why you want the pocket clip mounted correctly for left-handed carry. But yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Outside of that, there's not really a whole lot going on. The pocket clip is actually pretty well designed. I don't think it needs to be so long. The pocket clip could be like half the size, right? Even with somebody who's working construction, right, and they're jostling around all day, I don't think the clip needs to be this long. I'd say the clip could be reduced by about 33%, and it would just be fine. Ergonomically, the thing's already just kind of a rectangle. I can't say that it bothers me a whole lot more than the scales do, and the scales don't really bother me all that much, so I just can't really complain. The steel lock bar insert does double as the over travel stop, which is nice, right? They really managed to capture both the elements that a modern knife enthusiast person likes, right? The fidget factor's complete there. The titanium, right? The internal milling. It's got those elements that we expect from the modern production knife world, right? The nicer end of it. But you also have that utility and convenience there, right? Basically, I think this is people who really, really love the utility and convenience of replaceable razor blades, which, I mean, it is, you can't really argue with that. I mean, it really is just a flat out more convenient thing, right? But, if you're willing to pay a little bit more for something that you enjoy, right? It's not like this is better. It's not better than a $5 utility box cutter or $10 utility box cutter. It's not better. It's more compact, right? We could argue about that if you want to, but I'd say just save all that. It's not necessarily better. It's going to complete the same thing. It's just going to feel a bit more special. It's just going to be a little bit cooler, right? It's going to be a little bit more of a conversation piece. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. It comes down to what you enjoy. If it brings you a little bit more happiness than your old $5 Husky this or that, right? Yeah, so these come in at $80, which I think is pretty impressive considering a lot of the work is actually done in Washington. Exactly how much, I don't know. But I think that's impressive. I think it's about $85, if I'm not mistaken. $85 is what this comes in at. So yeah, I mean, it's not something that I'm gonna say, oh my gosh, this is like revolutionary. It changes the whole knife game, right? Nothing like that. It's very close to a budget knife, which I think is really neat. But generally speaking, I do find this to be something I would recommend to people. We like stuff like this, right? It's not a like one of those things where it's like the joy in it is not that, it's, oh my gosh, it's the most economic this or that. No, we like things that go a little bit beyond whatever there's like the base object's purpose is, just because it's interesting, right? There are way too many examples for anybody to say that that's not justifiable. It is, right? So in that sense, because it's cool and it's compact and it's a convenient tool, right? And then once you buy it, really the only additional costs are the razor blades, right? I mean, even a box like this, unless you're a roofer, I know, right? Well, I know how fast you guys go through those blades, and I know they're different, the hook blades, right, and utility blades like this, right? If you're working, in construction or something similar all day, every day, then obviously you're going to go through razor blades a lot faster, right? But for the average person, a box of razor blades like this is going to last you a long time. Yeah, generally speaking, I think this is recommendable. I'm going to put it in my recommended knives playlist. I think it's really, really cool, and I'm surprised by that. I really did not expect to think this was all that great. I expected to be very, very underwhelmed by it, and I just think it's cool. So yeah, I think that's going to be about it today, guys. This was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but it was a fun review to do. Thanks again to Exceed Designs for sending this in. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.